Yeah, the recordings will all be posted after the event in case you can't make it to all the workshops.
Okay, let's get started with the opening ceremony. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the Youth in the Spotlight conference hosted by Gen Z We Are the Future. So you may already know me, but hi, my name is Claire and I am the CEO and co-founder of Gen Z We Are the Future.
Yeah, and hi everyone, my name is Sophia Fantila and I'm the CCO and co-founder of Gen Z or the Future. And now we're just going to run through some logistics about conference before we officially begin.
Yeah, and so today we have the honor of hearing from Mitchell Rosenberg from Simplified on a speech about inclusivity in political engagement, and also Rachel from Project W on a workshop about design thinking, Andrew from The Tester magazine on a workshop about youth advocacy in media, Stephanie from Superposition on a speech about creating impact without being a founder, Mira and Senna from the Indigenous Foundation on a workshop about intersectionality in activism and advocacy, Madison Sidhu from YCAC on a workshop about taking action and why it matters, Audrey from YTech on a workshop about breaking gender and accessibility barriers in tech, Naomi Porter from Entrepreneurship on a workshop about taking your impact to the next level, and lastly but not least, Santiago went from Loop Media about breaking echo chambers and filter bubbles for a global conversation.
Yeah, and we'll also have a lot of breaks throughout the day, so you don't have to stare at a Zoom screen the entire day. We'll have a lunch break and other small breaks. And if you ever need any help, just private chat anyone who has a purple background like this, and they'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Yeah, and if you have any questions at any point, feel free to email us at info@genzwearethefuture.org.
Yeah, and without further ado, I'll hand it over to Mitch and Marissa, who will be moderating the session. So let's get started, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to Inclusivity in Political Engagement, How Change is Possible When We Bring People into the Conversation, hosted by Mitchell Rosenberg. We are so excited to have Mitchell here with us today, who will be speaking about increasing diversity in politics. With that, I'll hand it over to Mitchell.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for having me here today and for doing all of this and all of the work you can put in. You can hear me, right? Just making sure. Okay, cool. I'm so inspired by the mission of this organization and by all of you for showing up. It's so easy to not show up and to spend your time doing something else, but your dedication and your passion for change will be the difference between, say advancing solutions to some of the most persistent issues in our society and just maintaining the status quo. Also, throughout this, feel free to throw things in the chat. If you're bored, tell me. If you're having the time of your life, tell me that too. If I tell a really funny joke, tell all your friends. But anyway, today I wanted to talk a bit about and get your thoughts on bringing people into the conversation, like Marissa just mentioned. So what exactly does that mean? I'm still trying to figure that out myself, but I'll give it a shot. I don't need to tell you how polarized society has become. It's palpable. The fear of bringing up politics at the dinner table, or the awkward question on a first date. So you're a Democrat or Republican, right? Or the angry rhetoric and divisiveness we all see on TV every day. So what do we do about such a polarized society? How do we calm the tension? And that's where I think the idea of bringing people in comes into play. I truly believe that the more people know, the more they understand the issues that matter to them and their families, the more likely they'll be able to, one, be involved, two, support the advancement of a solution to, say, a certain issue, and three, bring others along with them. So let's take an example. If you were to rank the issues you're most passionate about, the ones you feel need immediate change, I'm sure some of you would say healthcare, right? It's a big one. And healthcare is personal. So being able to connect with an issue on a personal level and a person to person level in a conversation it's huge in getting someone to listen and understand. My uncle passed away just a few months ago from colon cancer. He didn't know he had, because although he knew he was at higher risk, he didn't have health insurance and couldn't get screened. And that's the messed up world we live in, but it doesn't have to be that way. But now I have a very personal story I can share with someone who is on the opposite side of the healthcare debate than I am. And I can connect with them based on shared experiences and have a conversation that's led with my heart first. I can explain to them what I know about the issue at hand and how it's affected my own life. And that's where education comes in. So many of my friends would shy away for years from having any sort of what they would call political conversations. I don't know enough, they would say. And can you blame them? I mean, the education system has failed at truly teaching enough civic education and political engagement. That lack of education has created a culture in which people don't think they have to be involved. It makes it look like politics are just a game and not everyone has to be involved. I bet a lot of you are your friend's political friend, the one your friend goes to with any political question they might have, right? I'm sure some of you have experienced that before. You're the one they go to, and I do too, all the time. And I enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but I knew there had to be another way, a place for people to go to learn about the issues they care about, even if they don't know much about them to start. So I toyed around with an idea for a while about a one-stop shop for anyone just getting started to learn the basics about those hot button political issues. Think climate change or healthcare or proposals you hear about all the time in those areas, like the Green New Deal or Medicare for All. And that's what I was setting out to achieve. So come April of 2020, I came up with my idea. And it was a little online platform on my computer called Untitled Political Project for my friends to come to and learn about the questions they've been asking me to answer. I was hesitant to follow through. I didn't really know how to go about getting it started or what to do. So I called a friend, smart friend, who gave me this brilliant advice. Write this down. He said, I don't know, just do it. So helpful. But once I hung up that call, I replayed that line over and over again in my head, just do it. And I quickly felt like I was in a Nike commercial. But beyond that, it all suddenly clicked for me. If I wanted to do this, I just had to do it, figure it out. I knew what my mission was. It was to make politics accessible for everyone and teach people how they can engage, that it doesn't have to be that hard, that politics should be open to everyone, and that engaging in political conversations with your friends and family and strangers can be a good thing, that it doesn't have to be the forbidden topic at Thanksgiving dinner. Now, I'll caveat this with the understanding that not everyone has that ability to safely engage in a conversation about a controversial political issue with their family or with strangers. We definitely know that, but you typically have someone, right? Someone you can talk to. And I really believe that that's how we make change, through a ripple effect of knowledge that cascades from one conversation to the next. So after my friend told me to just do it, that's what I did. I started Simplified, just an Instagram account at the time aimed at simplifying politics. I didn't really think what week 2 would look like after we started. I just started the account, told my friends, and was off to the races. Side note, think about what week 2 will look like before you start. That's my advice. It's a little stressful if you don't. But Simplified was launched on April 19th, 2020, so a bit over a year ago, and published short video explainers on the issues of the week, whatever politicians and pundits were talking about. So we covered the census, the Green New Deal, the Electoral College, the Democratic primary, and a whole lot more. I kind of just threw it all at the wall to see what would stick. And it took a long time to figure that out, and we're still figuring it out. But along the way, I knew immediately that we were making a difference. Even with just a few hundred followers at the time, I started getting calls and texts from friends and coworkers and old teachers and DMs from strangers telling me how useful it was for them, how useful these little videos were for them to feel like they actually understand the basics of a topic that just before felt unattainable and ungraspable to them. One that will stick with me always is from a dear friend's mom who texted me a few days after we shared our first video on the census. And she said something like, OMG, I watched your video on the census and finally understand what it is and why it matters. I just grabbed it off our counter, filled it out, and sent it back. And my heart was immediately warm. Although just one example, I knew we were on to something. And it didn't even have to be partisan. My goal for Simplified was and is that everyone is welcome. Everyone is invited to join the conversation. We don't tell you what to do or what to believe. We give you the facts and the arguments you need to understand an issue and form your own opinion. But everything changed a month after the launch. As you all know, on May 25th, George Floyd was murdered and the world became a different place. People no longer wanted to sit on the sidelines. People were finding passion deep within them to advocate for the issues they care most about. And here's what I noticed. People didn't just want a seat at the table, they wanted to be a part of the conversation. They wanted to have the knowledge and understanding so that they could sit at the dinner table and approach that conversation with facts and with confidence. So that's what we aimed to help people do. Simplified began putting out both graphics and videos in English and Spanish to ensure the content was as accessible to as many people as we could make it. We covered tougher topics, ones with more nuance, and deeply researched hundreds of topics sent to us by our followers. People were suddenly hungry for knowledge, and we wanted to help them find it. And then things sort of took off. You all know how intense the lead up to the election was. People were desperate for knowledge. They wanted to understand where Trump and Biden stood on the issues. They wanted to know how and when to vote. They wanted to know how to talk to their kids about politics, and we were trying to deliver. So as our following grew, so did the scrutiny, as I'm sure you've seen and you know. I had to stop reading comments early on. The internet's a brutal place and I'm not tough enough. But we were gaining an audience, though, that trusted us, that relied on us for their information. And I was committed to not losing that trust. We quickly instituted from the beginning a strict editing and fact-checking process, doing all we could to ensure only accurate, well-sourced information was going out to our audience. And people noticed. The pinch me moment for me, when Joe Biden's campaign reached out and said they wanted to work with us to get information out in a digestible way about the election, how to vote, where to vote up and down the ballot. And I was thinking, you're kidding, right? I mean, you've got the wrong number, but apparently I was wrong. Simplified's now grown to a multi-platform organization with content that's seen between 2 to 4 million times per month. And we've amassed to a team of about 85 people across 15 countries who speak a dozen languages, the most passionate team that I truly could not have done any of this without. We work weekly with the White House now to bring relevant information to our followers about what's going on in DC. We launched our Conversations with Congress series to bring Congress members right to the people they represent. And we're constantly thinking about new, exciting ways to keep people engaged, even when there's not a hotly contested presidential election coming up. And by the way, if you have ideas of how to do that, please let me know, because it's a challenge. I have personally always been a political nerd. Politics are exciting to me, but I didn't always know that that's what I wanted to do. Ever since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to help people. There was always something in me that made me want to reach out a helping hand and lift people up wherever I could, but I wasn't sure how best to do it. So when I was young, I thought I figured it out. I was going to work in the McDonald's drive-thru. I always saw those McDonald's employees as people who were helping others. People ask for good food, the employees give it to them, and the people are happy. So my path was set, and McDonald's, here I come. As I got a little bit older, I realized there may be another option. I was obsessed with Ellen DeGeneres at the time. I would watch her show almost every day when I got home from school. And I loved watching how much joy she brought into people's lives and the happiness that would exude from her guests and audience. And I once again thought I figured it out. I would go work on a talk show that does just that, helps people by telling real stories and reaching out that helping hand. And then I even went to college to study television. But I was wrong again. A little more than a year into college, something just changed. I got a call from a friend working on Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. He needed some help at a fundraiser she was doing in Southern California and asked if I could come by. And even though I wasn't a total political nerd yet, I was still obsessed with Hillary Clinton and of course said yes. Saying yes on that call changed my life forever. As soon as I worked on that first event and then dozens more after with her and President Clinton and Chelsea Clinton, something clicked. This is how you make real change, I thought, through policy. Policymakers have an unbelievable amount of power and resources to enact meaningful policy that can lift people up or tear them down. And much of the power rests with them. So this time I finally figured it out. This is how I'm going to help people. So I quickly added on a political science major, but didn't drop my original television one. I continued to serve in student government and advocate for real change on my campus, from mental health services to sustainability efforts. And I piled on the political experience at all levels of government, working for the state and Congress and on campaigns from city council to the White House. And I was set on the political path. And right after graduation, I moved up to Sacramento to work on the legislative affairs team for Governor Newsom, a job that has taught me more than I could ever imagine about how to actually make change. And never could I have imagined working in this office in the middle of the action during a pandemic that has changed everything and only exacerbated the real struggle so many people face. So it's more apparent now than ever that it's going to be the great task of our generation to right this ship. I'm not that much older than you, I swear. It's amazing that things have continued to go so off course so dramatically for our country. America has long been in a position to be proud of who we are and what we stand for. We've been respected by the world. We've basked in our own achievements in so many different areas. And yet, here we are. We find ourselves at a time of disarray, division, and uncertainty fueled by nature, as in our climate crisis, but also fueled by hatred and disinformation. Who would have believed that a global pandemic would divide us rather than bring us together? Who would have believed that millions of people wouldn't trust the outcome of an American election? Who would have believed that lies and deception would take hold across the country to the extent they have? I told you about Simplified, about my random idea to bring more people into the fold. And I tell you this to encourage your idea and your passion, to take that seed and grow it into something meaningful, to take that leap and just do it. Be a part of righting this ship. Educating people goes a long way toward making change. There's a doctor I admire named Lippy Roy. She says that when she started out trying to convince unvaccinated people to get vaccinated, she would tell them the facts and figures and even berate them for not wanting the vaccine. And it just wasn't working. But then she had a breakthrough. She says she started to listen to them. She would listen to what their particular concern was, their fears, their beliefs, without judging them. And then she would tell them she understood what they were telling her, and she would gently, one by one, address their concerns. And she said listening and understanding them, rather than dismissing and disrespecting them, made all the difference. And this method can be applied across the board. Listen, understand, and educate. Be patient, learn from others. And look, I know this is easier said than done. I'm a yeller. I get annoyed very quickly when someone's beliefs are what I would see as backwards. But yelling isn't getting me anywhere. So I breathe deeply, listen, understand, and educate. Never before has it been more clear that it's up to us. We are going to have to find a way to go above the division and reach people, to make sure that the future of politics is not about gamesmanship and power grabbing. It's ultimately about helping people, real help for real people. And that's what the goal is. And we need to work together to bring about change and to care about our fellow human beings and to always, always lead with our hearts. So thanks so much again for having me, and excited to see how the whole day goes.
If that is all, that was amazing. I learned so much about how we can introduce more people into politics. So our next event of the day will be Introduction to Design Thinking by Rachel Navarrete. We hope to see you all there. And once again, thank you so much, Mitchell. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Yeah, there are two questions in the chat. The first one is, what is one lesson you learned the hard way from running Simplified?
That's a great question. I think, it's been a ride. It's been a figure it out as you go thing. And I think a lesson I learned the hard way is, issues are not black and white. They're just not. It's so easy to box it in that there's a right answer and a wrong answer based on what you believe. And I think we noticed in our content, things are really nuanced, right? And that's the hardest part about simplifying politics. Politics are not simple. Politics are complex and complicated. I think on purpose. I think that's a purposeful move on the part of policymakers to disenfranchise people and keep them out, because if it's too complicated for you to understand, why would you be a part of it? So I think that's something we learned the hard way, is that to simplify politics, to kind of dumb it down, right, and make it accessible for everyone, you are losing some of that nuance and some of that complexity. So we've had to really kind of balance and figure out how we give you enough information, but without scaring you away. How are we inviting you in, not having, if it's your first time learning about healthcare as an issue or climate change or whatever, how are we not scaring you away? How are we inviting you in? How are we not coming off as elitist with that information and making it accessible? So I think that's something we've learned, and I think we've improved on for sure, in trying to capture those nuances and make references to them while reminding people that we're not here to make you the foremost expert on healthcare policy, but we're here to kind of give you those basics so you feel that you know where you're going. So I think that's a great question. I think that's what I learned, and we're continuing to learn every day.
All right, and next we have, how should young people reply to older people / adults when they get told that they're too young to understand this when talking about politics?
That's obviously something I've dealt with, and that pisses me off, for lack of a better word, often. So I think that's a really great question, Beth. I think the way I would honestly do it, and I do this at work. I work in the governor's office with a lot of people who are way older than me and way more experienced than me, and I'm always the least experienced one at the table. But if I enter the room with confidence and I'm like, yes, I belong here, I know what I'm talking about, I've done my work, then they don't really get to say that, right? They're impressed and kind of taken aback that I was as prepared as I was. So I think that's my advice, and that's why I talked about giving people that info so they can join, they can be a part of the conversation. They can sit around that table and kind of address those things and address those arguments. So, take an example because we're all talking about of COVID vaccines, right? It's the same few arguments for the majority of the, there's 25% right now of the population that's eligible for a vaccine that hasn't gotten one. And most of them are going behind the same few arguments, right? Probably that it's not FDA approved, that it was approved too fast, we don't know the long-term effects, etc. So my advice in that example is learn the facts on those main arguments when you're going into a conversation, right? So if you're going into a conversation with someone and you've already prepared on those few facts that you know are the ones that people are going to bring up most likely, then you're prepared to rebut those things with facts and figures, and they, will probably take a step back if they're willing to listen and say, oh, okay, you were prepared and you knew what you're talking about. So I think it's about going with confidence. It can be scary, but go in with confidence, and go in with your research and your work done. And look, if you don't know, you can say, that's a really interesting argument. I don't know enough about it. I'm going to go back and learn more about it, and I'd love to talk about it in the future. I think the last thing you want to do is make stuff up or pretend you know more than you know, because that's easy to get called out on when you don't. So take it back and learn. So I think those are kind of a few ways, but don't be afraid by the adults in the room who love to shoo away the younger people.
And then also we have, how can young people start getting involved in government and policy?
That's a really great question, Caroline. I think that's something that I, struggled with too when I was like, oh wait, this is what I want to do. I think a few pieces of advice. Intern, and there are so many opportunities to intern, right? You have, wherever you live, you have your local Congress member, you have your city council, you have your mayor, you have your state, we have a state assembly, state senate, you might have your state delegate, depending on where you are. Everyone has different names there, but your state reps, all these levels of people that always want interns, they always need help to do these things. I think that's one way. Another way is to intern for an organization, an advocacy organization, like the Sierra Club, if you're interested in environment, or, Churla's an immigration related one. There's obviously hundreds of them. I think that's another great way to do it. And then finally, campaigns are the most incredible way, because campaigns always need help. And they just need bodies, and they just need hands, and they need passionate people, and especially passionate young people. So whether they have you phone banking or knocking on doors or, proofreading stuff that they write or writing social media posts for them or whatever it is. I got involved in campaigns, like I mentioned in Hillary Clinton's presidential one, but then also worked on local city council races when I was in college. And that was a really formative way for me to learn a lot about how to be involved in politics, what you do, what it looks like to run for office, if that's something you're interested in, et cetera. So I say, don't shy away and jump in and send some emails and find organizations that you like. If you were interested in Simplified, reach out to me, and there are ways to do different things like that. And then being a part of an organization like this, being at this conference, you're doing it, right? You're doing the work, you're learning about it, you're learning about the ways to advocate for change.
And next up we have, what is your favorite thing about running Simplified?
Oh God, I'm tired, to be honest. But I think my favorite thing about running Simplified is how rewarding it is. It's really hard. Like I said, I don't read the comments. People are really mean, as you know, online. And we read the comments in terms of like, if we, God forbid, we make a mistake, we read that. But people just like to go after you for no reason. So that part's not so fun. But the favorite part is how rewarding it is. I gave that example of my friend's mom texting me that she filled out the census after our video. That's really meaningful. The more I hear from people, friends I haven't talked to in years, or coworkers that they saw what we did, or they watched one of our Instagram live conversations, or they did whatever, and they learned something from it and they took it. I have a teacher, two teachers that are friends who say, I use your stuff in my class. That makes like my heart flutter. People who say, I knew nothing about this issue, but we talk. I have a friend who said recently, we talk about once a week at our family dinner table, we take a simplified post and talk about it. That's so cool. Because this is the work. Like I started this in my bedroom, right? Like I started this little thing as just an idea of how to get more people involved, and the fact that it's achieving that, I think there's a lot more we can do. We're all volunteers. Everyone on this team, we all work or go to school or both, and are busy. But putting the work into this, and I think my other favorite part that I mentioned is just the most passionate team I could ever imagine. Like I said, everyone's a volunteer, and we have team members all over the world who are writing and researching and fact checking and designing and being creative about new ways to get people engaged. And that's just been a really rewarding thing, for all of us.
Okay, and next we have, what are your plans for your future, and where do you see Simplified going?
Oh God, my future. I don't necessarily know what I'm doing tomorrow, so I have to figure that out first. I'll also if I don't fail in 13 days, I'll have my master's, so that's my goal, to get through that, and then I'll feel better. My plan. I'm a government nerd through and through. I think I'm going to work in government my whole life, work in the public sector my whole life. I think what I've learned from my office is everyone is so tired. Everyone is so burnt out from this pandemic. As you can imagine, we thought it was going to be 3 weeks in the beginning, and here we are, over a year and a half later. But with that, everyone is so unbelievably passionate about the work that they're doing. And it's really rewarding at the end of the day. In government, there's not a lot of like, yay, success, and you get to celebrate. Like maybe if you work for a company in the private sector and you finish a specific project, we go yay, and then we get punched in the stomach with another disaster and kind of keep going. So I think that, but there's something special there, and there's something special about the people that I work with who have been in government for 40 years, who really just admire it, and are public servants through and through, and work all day and night to help people and better people's lives. So I think that's definitely part of it. In terms of Simplified, I want to continue to grow Simplified. I think that there's, I think we all know, and I mentioned it, like the lack of civic education in this country, and how it really hurts people. Like people don't know, and I think the solution to a lot of the problems we face is adequately educating people. Because of that, I think that there's a lot of stuff we can do. A lot of stuff we can do to continue to reach new people, whether it's working with the education sector. I really want to launch Simplified Junior, which are like kids explaining politics to kids. I think would be cute and fun. We have just a lot of ideas there to continue it. So we're going to continue to build, continue to put out content about what things people want to see. But like I said, our challenge also right now is how to keep people engaged outside of a major election year. And I think we thought after the election things would drop off, but they definitely did. People needed a break and they were tired. But how do we keep people engaged and, say that you don't have to be so tired, but you can still be involved in politics throughout the year, because it's really important.
And next, kind of relating back to the last question, do you think you're ever gonna run for an office?
I definitely have goals to run for office one day, I think, because I've seen, especially firsthand now, how much change and how effective a good policymaker, lawmaker can be. So I see it in my office, our state senators, state assembly members that really no one knows their names, they have a hell of a lot of power, and they have a lot more power really than a member of Congress, because we get a lot of stuff done in California, for example. I still don't understand how it's 2021 and we have a huge swath of this population that doesn't know how they're going to put food on the table for their kids the next day. And my congressman back at home has been in there since the year I was born, in 1997. So hopefully that's not too far, before you all. But I'm like, where's the change, right? Like, I get it that it's hard. Policy change is hard, but how do we not have enough people in there desperately fighting for these things? That really sticks with me. So it's on my mind. Don't know when, don't know how, but definitely thinking about it.
And what suggestions do you have for people looking to learn more about government and politics?
That's a great question. Follow Simplified, because that's exactly what we're trying, not to plug it, but that's exactly what we're trying to do, right? Is bring people into the fold. That's what we'll continue to try to do, is find, like I said, creative ways to educate people on that. I think there are other resources online, if kind of government 101 kind of stuff, if you just want to learn the basics. But I think the only way to really dive in is to do something like an internship, like I mentioned. They are unbeatable experiences where you're thrown into the fire, in these really, we have tons of interns in our office, and they're immediately thrown in and expected to do real work. And, there's a lot of trust put in them. They hear a lot of stuff. I think what's really interesting about my office specifically is it's the governor's office, right? So you're in the middle of all the disasters. So it's not, if you work at the labor agency, you're focused on labor issues, or EPA, you're focused on environmental issues. In the governor's office, you're focused on all the disasters, everything that happens. And that on it, I have learned more than I could ever imagine. And I'm sure once I leave eventually, I will really understand how much I learned. But I think the way to do it really is to throw yourself in. So educate yourself on the outside, read a good book. My favorite book recommendation is called The Education of an Idealist. If you haven't read it, by Samantha Power, who was the US ambassador to the UN and is now the director of USAID, which is humanitarian aid. And it totally changed my entire worldview about what the US should do abroad, and how we should be involved in humanitarian aid. And going into it, I was totally ignorant about foreign affairs and foreign policy. And it's a really, really easy read. So it's called The Education of an Idealist. It's not hard to read, and I definitely recommend it. So books, following Simplified and others, and interning, I think would be my three biggest pieces of advice.
Okay, and our last question for today will be, how can we contact you and find out more about Simplified?
Sure. I'll put my email in the chat. I think that's my email. Feel free to email me there. Feel free to contact Simplified on Instagram. Actually, don't contact Simplified on Instagram. We won't see it. It's overwhelming to try. I am so overwhelmed and no one helps me go through our DMs, so don't do that. But email me and I'll definitely see it. If you want to learn more, whether it's about, if you want to learn about Simplified, or you just want to talk about, what you're passionate about, or your future, your idea, if you have an idea, to take things off. If you have another idea, for us that, to help engage more people, definitely let us know. But feel free to reach out for anything. I'm here, happy to talk.
Okay, great. So that'll be all for today. Thank you so much, Mitchell, for coming and speaking. That was a great little speaker keynote. And next up, we will have a short break, and then we'll come back to hear from Rachel Navarrete about design thinking in 5 minutes.
Thanks, everyone. Great chatting with you.